So we do bring up 2004 and the fact that you've been, mulling over it with the Barnacles, and that this documentary is coming out. So 20 years since that kind of remarkable run. How did it change your life, and how did it change, how did it change you as a manager to have gone through that?
Well, Alex, the first thing I would say is it probably allowed me to continue managing the Red Sox because, I kind of knew the lay of the land. And, when we're down 3-0, I remember thinking this isn't good. This isn't going to end well. But, uh, it's funny how things work. I think the way I've said it is probably appropriate the way we won. All the years people thought they were going to win and it somehow eluded them. Then when people kind of almost threw in the towel, like we have no chance, for us to come back and win that way, that was probably the perfect way to do it.
It's super interesting to think about, like, as you talk about the comfort level that you were experiencing with the Cincinnati guys, and that you had that fit with the Cleveland guys. I mean, what you were walking into in Boston was insane, right? Like, when you think about the circumstances of you're jumping into a team that just got knocked out in Game 7, like 86 years of, of heartbreak, on top of which you have like these massive superstars, all of whom are sitting on the cusp of free agency with questions about their future. Like, at the time, did it seem like it's something insane that you were going into? And how different is it now looking back on what you were walking into?
It's a really good question. I think I was so naive coming into it, and I think it actually helped me. I remember showing up the first day of spring training, and Manny was telling everybody the Red Sox had put him on eBay, and he didn't want to attend the first meeting we had. I mean, there. So I got indoctrinated right from the first day. But I will say, like, I was coming up to Boston probably every other week for a couple months while they were hiring me, and I guess I was semi-interviewing still. I don't even know how to put it, but the one thing I noticed early on was Theo was the smartest guy in the room, and I don't say that sarcastically. And you better try to keep up with him. And I say that like complimentary. I mean, this guy could do 10 things at once. I had never seen that, and like I said, you better try to keep up. But like in the winter meetings and things, he would come back to the suite and he'd have 10 things going at once. And I'd be like, whoa, and that's just how his brain worked. And I knew I was around somebody that was going to figure out a way to get it done. And that's why when he went to Chicago and everybody would ask me, hey, what do you think? My answer was always the same. He was too hardworking and he was too smart not to build a winner. And he did.
The crazy thing, Tito, is this is the story of the 2004 Red Sox World Series championship. Okay, it's a three-part series. I don't think you're in episode one because episode one is about '03 and 86 years. And it was almost a reminder that even the documentary has to begin with the weight of the history of the Boston Red Sox, right? That's what you were coming into. When you first came into that, like, how did you get your head around it? How did you compartmentalize it? How did you make sure that you weren't going to get crushed by the weight of that history?
TC, I can remember I was down at Georgetown speaking to their baseball at a baseball event for their coach. The guy's name was Pete Wilk at the time. And Mike Barnacle was there with one of his sons. And he walked up to me, and this is, I think, the day after the meltdown in New York. And from my point of view, from an outsider, I had been in Oakland. You guys had just beat us to advance. And I remember thinking, I watched Grady's interview after. I'm like, man, he handled that pretty well. And, because I'd lived with Grady in the fall league. And I was like, he handled that well. And little did I understand how Boston worked. And Mike looked at me and he said, you know what? He goes, you're going to be the next manager of the Red Sox. And I looked at him like he had three heads. And about 10 days later, I was interviewing. And from there, things kind of happened fast. But I fall back on being a little naive, I think really helped me. I didn't feel the weight of the world. After I moved there a couple years later, and you're part of the community, I started to see it more and actually kind of became tougher because you're part of it. And I saw firsthand how these people felt about their team.
It's addressed in the documentary, but we tend to think of July 24th, the Tech A-Rod moment, the trade deadline, the Nomar, like that was it. The next day, you didn't lose another game, but you actually kind of struggled for the next few weeks. It didn't happen overnight. You were still trying to get that team to reach its potential almost all the way into September, weren't you?
You're right. Everybody points to that fight with, and again, you're trying desperately to find your personality as a team. And I do think that helped. But like you said, Theo made those trades at the deadline, which we needed to do. We weren't defensively, we weren't good enough. And then when he made those trades, I'd say like 10 days later, things started to gel. And from about the middle of August to the end, I mean, we were rolling. That's what was so difficult was, we beat a really good Angels team and we swept them. And then before you can even take a deep breath, we're down 0-3. And it's like, no, 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 this shouldn't happen. We're too good. But that's the way the game is, and it's kind of crazy. But we had a team that could thump. We had really good pitching, but then when we made the trades, it allowed us to defend, especially later in the game, way better than we had the first 3 months.
Yeah, how much from a strategic standpoint? Like obviously we've talked. Everyone talks a lot about the culture and the idiots and all that. Like from a strategic standpoint, how much fun were the 2004 Red Sox to manage in terms of being able to make flip over the infield in the late? Well, actually, like the whole field, right? Because you had Kapler going out to the outfield as well. To be able to make those kinds of changes, and then also like when you think about I'm curious when you think about '04, how much of it is locked in on on bullpen management over the course of October and what it was like trying to squeeze that pitching, like enough pitches from the pitching staff through those like unrelenting games.
You know, Alex, this gives me a chance to talk about Wake for a minute, which is always kind of an honor. But in that third game when we were just getting pummeled. When Wake came down the tunnel with his spikes in his glove, he is sacrificing a start that how much it had to mean to him, especially after the way that last year it ended. And he went out there and took those innings because we knew if we had any chance at all, we were going to have to lean on that bullpen like crazy. And Wake sucking up those innings, I try to always remind people of that because I don't want it to get glossed over because it was so important. And I remember when he came out, it gave me a little extra like, okay, these guys haven't quit. So let's try to figure this out. It just gave me a little bit of extra oomph going into the next day.